I raised my daughter to become the world's top violinist, only to hear her call another woman mom, mom. That woman forces me to practice the violin every day. I'm so sick of her. I was utterly shocked and, suppressing my emotions, went to get a DNA test. I just found out that my daughter is not actually my biological child. My sister-in-law is her birth mother. The daughter I carried for 10 months was switched by my mother-in-law and given to my sister-in-law, where she was mistreated and died before the age of 10. My daughter, along with my sister-in-law and her family, pushed me off a tall building to my death after I discovered the truth, then took possession of all my assets. When I opened my eyes again, I had returned to the day of childbirth, and I switched the child my mother-in-law had swapped back to the way it should be, in a family that favors sons over daughters. I'm curious to see if that ungrateful wretch can still achieve fame at a young age and enjoy boundless glory. Oh dear, she's about to give birth. May the ancestors of the Chi family bless us, and grant both daughters-in-law the birth of healthy, chubby boys. The pains of childbirth replaced the agony of falling from a great height and being shattered to pieces, and the howling wind in my ears turned into chaotic, urgent voices. Hearing my mother-in-law's loud voice once again, I finally became certain I had been reborn on the day of my childbirth. Mom, before entering the delivery room, with tears in my eyes, I endured the pain and called out to my mother who was accompanying me, go quietly and buy a fluorescent marker and a UV light, make a mark on the child, and don't tell anyone. Besides you, don't let anyone else touch the child. Although my mother was a bit puzzled, she still nodded and didn't forget to comfort me. Don't worry, I will keep a close eye on the child and guard against any attempts to steal them. But I shook my head, my lips pale. In my previous life, my mother-in-law, and husband took turns standing guard, keeping a close watch to prevent outsiders from stealing the child, but they couldn't stop my biased mother-in-law from swapping my baby. My mother-in-law has always favored the second son since childhood. This time, after her wish to hold a grandson was dashed, she even went so far as to swap the children of our two families, simply because our family is well off. She wanted the second son's daughter to be raised by us, so she could have the best life possible. Moreover, after we pass away, she could inherit our estate and hand it over to the second son's family. I just never expected to uncover the truth. For the sake of money, she disregarded over 20 years of upbringing and actually conspired with my sister-in-law's family to push me off a tall building. And my own daughter, unwelcomed by her younger siblings, unfortunately passed away after enduring 10 harsh summers and winters, having tasted all kinds of suffering. This time, I touched the baby still in my belly, my gaze darkening, determined not to let the tragedy of my past life happen again. The lights in the operating room blurred my vision. In a daze, the baby cried out as it was born, and I could no longer fight off the drowsiness, closing my eyes in exhaustion. I woke up to find it was already evening, with my mother looking anxious and furious beside me. Yingxian, your mother-in-law actually swapped the child with your second brother's wife while I wasn't looking. I held back from alarming her, but I also couldn't find the right moment to swap them back. She lowered her voice and spoke through gritted teeth right by my ear. Thankfully, I listened to you and marked them early, or I really wouldn't be able to tell the two babies apart. How could a mother-in-law be like this? My heart skipped a beat, but before I could say anything, my mother-in-law walked into the hospital room with a dark expression. Both daughters-in-law had given birth to girls, shattering her dream of having a grandson. Didn't you say you were going to make chicken soup? Mother-in-law, I'm here, so you can go ahead quickly, because my mother was still present. She put on an understanding demeanor and sent my mother away. After the person left, she turned to me and said, since you're awake now, Yingxian, I'm going to take a short nap. Keep an eye on the child yourself, and also watch over the second brother's wife, and don't forget to change the diaper. Without waiting for me to respond, my mother-in-law gave a few instructions and left, as if afraid of being asked to do more. This, in turn, created the perfect opportunity for me. The ward was quiet, and the sky had already darkened, with the lights off. The dim corridor light barely illuminated the room's layout. I looked at my sister-in-law and the baby sleeping soundly on the neighboring bed, tiptoed over to the bedside, carefully picked up the child, and quickly swapped them back. Then, I found a fluorescent mark on the tiny toenail of the right foot. Holding my long-lost treasure, tears of excitement and warmth streamed down my face. I held the child like this until my husband, Qixing, came to take over in the middle of the night. In my previous life, I told my husband the truth. Although he was extremely angry, there was nothing he could do. In the end, he even managed to accept the devastating news that our children had passed away. He even tried to persuade me, honey, the dead cannot be brought back to life, and we raised this daughter ourselves. Even though she's our brother's daughter, she still calls you mom, doesn't she, after I died? I even followed that ungrateful wretch's advice and transferred all the family assets to the second son's family, from dating to marriage. Qixing and I have supported each other for decades. He is excellent in every way, successful in his career, devoted to his family, and loving to his wife, but he is too soft-hearted and blindly filial, so now, I don't intend to tell him about the baby swap. When Qixing arrived, his mother-in-law was carrying a large bag of baby clothes back to the second son's house. "Mom," he stopped his mother-in-law, glancing at his sleeping sister-in-law and the baby beside her, "if you take all the clothes, what will the baby wear?" His mother-in-law snorted disdainfully, "A little girl doesn't need new clothes. These clothes are for my precious grandson. She shouldn't wear away her brother's good fortune." My mother-in-law's voice wasn't loud, but in the still of the late night, it still reached my ears clearly. Yes, in my previous life, my real biological daughter, who lived with my brother and his wife, never got to wear a single new piece of clothing. My daughter was malnourished, thin and frail, half a head shorter than children her age. My mother-in-law suggested dressing her in our old clothes. Some of the clothes were too worn for me to even bring out. I picked a few that were still decent for her, never imagining they would be the only clothes she had all year. In the summer, it was still manageable. My mother-in-law would patch together some rags, which could at least count as a change of clothes, but in winter, the daughter could only wear thin, old clothes, shivering and stomping her feet, with her hands and face turning blue and purple. In contrast, the mother-in-law and sister-in-law were dressed in thick, stylish clothes, one more fashionable than the other. Occasionally when I returned to my hometown, I couldn't bear to see it and bought scarves and new clothes for the whole family. But only the daughter's cotton-padded jacket was returned by my sister-in-law. She asked me to buy black ones, saying the child was mischievous and the clothes would easily get dirty. I had no doubt and changed it for a black one, but during the new year, I saw that coat and scarf being worn by my younger brother. It turned out that boys don't wear pink cotton coats. My daughter was still wearing the same thin, faded old coat that exposed her wrists. The baby in my arms smacked her lips. She was sleeping peacefully, with my warm tears that had just fallen on her little mouth. I gently wiped away the moisture from the corner of her mouth and unconsciously tightened my arms around her. My mother-in-law pointed to a bulging plastic bag on the floor. "Those are old clothes that Gonzi wore when he was little. She can wear those." Qixing was shocked. "Mom, that was so many years ago. Are those clothes even clean? What do you know? This way, it's easier to raise." Speaking of being easy to raise, Qixing seemed to recall something and asked weakly, "What about the name? It couldn't be that you gave it a name that's easy to raise, could it?" The old woman's face lit up with a proud smile. "The formal name is Zhaodi. The nickname can just be Godan." Qixing's lips trembled, his face full of disbelief. Would Gonzi and his wife agree to this? Why wouldn't they agree? What's wrong with this name? The mother-in-law retorted defiantly, "This name is great." A self-mocking smile curled at the corner of my mouth. In my previous life, that ungrateful child who once nestled at my knee often bullied my daughter because of this name. In this life, let her bear this name too. She disliked my teachings, she disliked the new clothes I bought her, and she disliked the violin classes I enrolled her in. Everything I gave her, she didn't like. She only yearns for her younger brother and sister's family. In this life, I want to see if she can achieve academic success and fame at a young age in her beloved mother's home. Just like in her previous life, my mother-in-law didn't rest for a moment, taking care of my younger brother and sister with all her heart, and those old clothes were soon worn by Zhaodi. Then, she picked up the unknown brand of powdered milk placed on the cabinet, casually scooped 2 spoonfuls, mixed it with hot water, and fed it to the crying, hungry baby. This action terrified Qixing and the family members accompanying the patient in the next bed. After feeding her, the mother-in-law came over again to check on my baby. Qixing stood up and stopped her. "Mom, we've hired a postpartum nanny. She can handle things like feeding the baby, so you should just rest. Why hire a nanny? It's a waste of money. Otherwise, you wouldn't be able to take care of both of us by yourself." After much persuasion, Qixing finally managed to convince her mother-in-law to leave. My gaze fell back on Zhaodi. She was crying uncontrollably because the milk she had just drunk was too hot. Perhaps I overestimated her. She might not even live to adulthood. I had thought my daughter's premature death in my previous life was an accident, but now it seems there might have been signs all along. Sure enough, before long, Zhaodi developed a fever. Large patches of rashes also appeared all over her body. It was unclear whether it was due to an allergic reaction to the old clothes or the formula milk she had consumed. Ironically, when Zhaodi cried uncontrollably on Zhang Yanyan's bed, neither she nor her mother-in-law took it seriously. Instead, they complained that the child was too noisy and kept shaking her, hoping to lull her to sleep. It was the nurse on rounds who noticed something was wrong. By the time the fever was detected, Zhaodi was already breathing weakly. her voice as faint as a mosquito's hum, her little face was flushed bright red, and large patches of redness spread across her body. Zhang Yangyang didn't care about this at all. She even thought that was my daughter. She even squeezed a bag of breast milk for me, saying she was afraid my daughter wouldn't eat well. The moment she turned around after handing me the small bag, I threw it into the trash without hesitation. In the previous life, it was Zhang Yangyang who came up with the idea to silence me by killing me. I asked myself if I had treated her poorly, but I fulfilled all the duties of an elder sister-in-law and even helped their family on multiple occasions. In the end, I met a tragic end, shattered to pieces, having a fever. Just bundle up and get warm. Isn't that how all children in our time got through it? The mother-in-law shouted loudly, stopping the nurse who was about to call the doctor, and picked up another old piece of clothing, ready to cover Zhaodi's forehead. Even the family members in the next room couldn't stand it anymore. Everyone in the entire ward, except for Zhang Yangyang, who remained indifferent, was criticizing the mother-in-law. The mother-in-law felt embarrassed and, under the nurse's insistence, hastily sent the child to the ICU. Just 2 days after birth, she was admitted to the ICU. Looking at Zhaodi's patient wristband, my eyes reddened at the corners, and my heart was filled with endless pain. That was the daughter I had cherished for most of my previous life. Perhaps today is the day I will meet my end. Her life had barely begun, yet it was already coming to an end. Her heart ached, mixed with numbness and a bone-chilling cold. In my previous life, it was she who pushed me off the balcony. At the moment of falling, I had already grabbed the edge of her clothes. As long as I didn't let go, I could at least pull someone down with me. But that person was the daughter I had cherished for over 20 years, from the baby in swaddling clothes, to babbling her first words, to growing into a graceful young woman. She was the daughter I had watched grow up, step by step. In that final moment, I ultimately let go, but I never expected that she had even prepared false evidence of my falling from the building. I died with a grievance, leaving my mother, who should have been cared for in her old age, to mourn the loss of her child, crying her heart out. Am I not her daughter too? And is my own daughter not innocent? Her life was ultimately saved. On the day I was discharged from the hospital, Zhaodi was transferred from the ICU to a general ward. This fever truly brought her to the brink of death. Her life was saved, but her liver and kidneys suffered irreversible damage, leaving her with lasting aftereffects. The doctor hesitated to speak to the family but finally whispered, I'm afraid this child may not live to adulthood. At this moment, Zhaodi appeared to be in high spirits. Her eyes darted around curiously, showing interest in everything around her, and she was more active and well-behaved than before, especially when she saw Zhang Yangyang. She became even more affectionate. Zhang Yangyang's family seemed unaware of the child-swapping incident and cherished this granddaughter, who had nearly lost her life, holding her and unable to put her down. Zhaodi also obediently clung to the adult's clothes. She was affectionate to everyone, except for me. The moment they saw me, they closed their eyes. I only took one look, and with my mother's arrangements, I was ready to be discharged from the hospital. Just before stepping out of the ward, I recalled this familiar gesture. In my previous life, whenever she was in a sulky mood, she would close her eyes and turn her head away, ignoring people. How could such a small baby have such an autonomous consciousness? I turned around and reappeared in Zhaodi's line of sight. Sure enough, the eyes that had just opened closed again. I silently stepped back as Zhang Yangyang's younger brother was playing a harmonica, tooting it noisily to amuse her. The baby's attention was captured, and his eyes seemed to glow as he looked at the harmonica. He made the elders burst into laughter. I also forced out a cold smile. Only then was I convinced that she had also been reborn. She seems to still be unaware of the devastating news that her fate is sealed with a short life. Zhaodi's gaze remained fixed on the harmonica, as if recalling the glorious moments when she once stood under the spotlight, playing music with boundless brilliance. But in this lifetime, even though she has mastered the violin to perfection, without me, can she still become the concertmaster? Zhaodi. The mother-in-law took her and coaxed her like teasing a kitten. Upon hearing this unpleasant name, Zhaodi froze for a moment before bursting into loud cries. Unfortunately, the more she cried, the more enthusiastically the mother-in-law tried to soothe her. In the end, with no other choice, the mother-in-law had to call her by her nickname, Gooden. I couldn't help but laugh as I walked. After being discharged from the hospital, my mother-in-law volunteered to take care of me during my postpartum confinement. I knew that taking care of me during my confinement was just an excuse. The real reason was to make me give up the professional postpartum caregiver for my sister-in-law. Besides, was she really here to take care of me during my confinement? She was clearly here to enjoy herself. In my previous life, when I was in confinement, she cooked at home entirely according to her own taste, heavy on oil, salt, and spice, making it impossible for me to eat. I told her many times, but she never changed. To outsiders, she says it's because I, as the daughter-in-law, am picky and hard to please. She often pockets the grocery money to give to the second son's family. When making soup, she eats a portion first, sends a portion to the second son's family, saves a portion for Qixing, and then dilutes the rest with water before serving it to me. He refused to buy formula, insisting that I breastfeed, claiming it was for the child's own good. At night, he slept soundly alone, leaving the child entirely to me and not allowing Qixing to help. He only made empty promises. A grown man shouldn't be taking care of a child. Qixing has to work tomorrow. We're both at home all day, so just leave it to us. Over time, Qixing stopped speaking up for me as well. After being tormented for a whole month, I was on the verge of postpartum depression by the time I finished my confinement. On the contrary, my mother-in-law gained a good reputation among the neighbors. In contrast, my sister-in-law Zhang Yangyang, though her family background was not as prosperous as mine, managed to hire an excellent confinement nanny. When we met again at the full-month celebration, she looked radiant, glowing, and had recovered exceptionally well. That top-tier confinement nanny was someone my husband, Qixing, had gone through great trouble to find through connections, but in the end, because my mother-in-law insisted on taking care of me during my confinement, we ended up giving the nanny to their family. All the good things went to Zhang Yangyang. We ended up doing all the hard work for someone else's benefit, watching my mother-in-law, who had been refused, still carrying large and small bags of luggage into the living room. I knew she had already convinced my soft-hearted husband and had once again made the decision for the two of us. However, this time, before my mother-in-law could even put her things away, my mom walked in with the postpartum nanny. "Oh, dear in-law, have you come to take care of Yingxian during her postpartum confinement? Our Yingxian is truly blessed. You've already hired a confinement nanny for the two of them, yet you still go to such lengths to do everything yourself. What is a confinement nanny?" My mother-in-law was stunned for a moment and looked at the nanny. "Didn't I tell you to go to the second son's house?" My mother quickly cut her off, pulled out her phone to record a video, and posted it on her social media. Our Yingxuan's wonderful mother-in-law, not only did she pay for the confinement nanny, but she also came in person to help take care of her during the postpartum period. "Come on, mother-in-law, look at the camera, let's take a photo together." My mother-in-law pushed my mom's hand away and was about to frown and retort when she noticed neighbors passing by outside the door poking their heads in to join the excitement. My mom immediately greeted everyone and even introduced the postpartum caregiver to each of the neighbors, making sure they got acquainted. With all this distraction, the social media post was already sent out. The mother-in-law forced a smile and said, "Mother-in-law, please come in quickly. Leaving the door open isn't good for Yingxian. She might catch a chill." My mother, thoroughly satisfied after strolling around and soaking up the neighbors' praises, finally returned and sat on the sofa. While showing off on social media, she asked what we were having for dinner. Qixing was also a bit confused about the situation, but he first helped the maternity nurse get settled while ordering from the restaurant closest to home. My mother-in-law's expression was very unpleasant. My mother had come uninvited and even brought along the postpartum nanny who was supposed to be at my second brother's house. What's worse, my mother even claimed that this nanny was paid for by my mother-in-law. You should know that postpartum nannies aren't cheap, especially since this one seems to be a top-tier nanny. Wouldn't that cost her a fortune? The mother-in-law shot a fierce glare at the arrogant mother sitting on the sofa, then switched to a warm expression as she entered my room. "Yingxian," she rubbed her hands together, her eyes unconsciously drifting toward the baby sleeping in my arms. "What's the matter with your mother? I already said I'd come to take care of you during your postpartum confinement, so why did she bring a confinement nanny along?" I sneered inwardly. Originally, my husband and I had agreed to hire a confinement nanny with our own money, but she had to butt in. Not only did she refuse to listen and insisted on taking care of me herself, but she also went behind my back and convinced Qixing to give the nanny to his younger brother's family. Now she's making it sound like we're the ones being unreasonable, wanting to have our cake and eat it too. I pulled up the small quilt and covered the baby, shielding him from my mother-in-law's nauseating gaze. Seeing that I remained silent, my mother-in-law confidently laid out her plan. "How about this? Since I'm here to take care of you during your confinement, I'll definitely be more attentive than any outsider. As for the postpartum nanny, why not let the younger brother's family have her? Yangyang still has no one to take care of her, and it wouldn't be right to ask her mother to come, would it? Since you already have a confinement nanny here, it's perfect to let her take over." I lifted my eyelids and spoke unhurriedly. "Mom, you're getting on in years. It's time for you to enjoy the happiness of family life. There's really no need for you to come and take care of me." The mother-in-law curled her lips, a flicker of disdain in her eyes, almost rolling them. "On the contrary, I laughed and said, in my opinion, you should hire a nanny for your sister-in-law too, so you can have some peace and quiet. My mother-in-law seemed not to have expected that I, the soft persimmon, would now be so hard to handle. She widened her eyes as if she had heard something utterly rebellious, trembling all over with anger. Do you think everyone is as wasteful as you? Every penny you spend was earned through my son's hard work. She paced back and forth in the room, pointing her finger at me. Panting heavily, don't hire that confinement nanny anymore, give her to the second son's family, as the eldest sister-in-law. You should consider your brother-in-law's family. I had already discussed it with Xingzi, but you don't trust me, your own mother-in-law, and instead believe an outsider. Xiaobao was so frightened that he burst into loud crying. Hearing the noise, my husband rushed into the room quickly. My mother-in-law and I were locked in a silent standoff, neither willing to yield. The room so quiet that only the baby's cries and soft, soothing whispers could be heard. Qixing looked at his angry mother-in-law, then at my cold expression, and pulled his mother out. Mom, let's just listen to Yingxian and keep the maternity nurse. Why don't you go to Gangzi's place? It's the same anyway. What do you mean it's the same? You have no idea. The maternity nurse was soothing the baby, my husband was coaxing his mother. And my own mom, oh, Yanyang's mom. How is Yanyang's recovery from the C-section going? Don't worry, my mother-in-law spent 30,000 yuan to hire a top-tier confinement nanny for us. Between sisters-in-law, we won't show favoritism. When Yanyang is discharged from the hospital and enters her confinement period, we'll definitely hire an even more expensive one. My mom had previously added my sister-in-law's mom as a friend at the hospital. And now she's video chatting with her. What? My in-law's mother doesn't look well. What are you talking about? My mother turned her head and came face to face with my mother-in-law, who was fuming with pent-up anger. Her face flushed a deep, purplish red. What's wrong, dear-in-law? My mom asked knowingly, deliberately keeping the video call on. Her eyes darted around before she suddenly put on a stern expression. Could it be that they think the maternity nurse is too expensive and won't hire one? I've already posted it on my social media, and now you're backing out. Do you want my old friends to laugh their heads off? When a mother-in-law spends money and effort to take care of her daughter-in-law during her postpartum confinement, isn't that just the natural thing to do? How come it's different in your family? Mom was aggressive, looking flustered and angry as she hung up the call that had just been going so well, then sat on the sofa with her hands on her hips. Mother-in-law was held back by my husband and was about to argue. But her phone in her pocket rang at an inopportune moment. Mom shot a cold glance. It was Zhang Yanyan's mother calling. The mother-in-law was so angry that her temples throbbed. She took a deep breath, pinching her fingers, and then went to the balcony to answer the phone. Her words were full of flattery, a far cry from her earlier arrogance. Zhang Yanyang is notoriously known here as a difficult mother-in-law. In the first few years after she married into the family, she would have small arguments with her mother-in-law every 3 days and major fights every 5 days, returning to her parents' home every half-month. Her parents were certainly not easy to deal with either. The phone call lasted until the middle of the night. My mother-in-law complained about her bad luck, cried, and made a scene, finally issuing an ultimatum to us, the young couple: if you want to hire a postpartum nanny, I can't stop you, but you'll have to pay for it yourselves. She packed up her barely unpacked luggage and moved out of our house overnight. As she left, she didn't forget to curse, "Ungrateful wretch, forgetting your mother the moment you get a wife." Her husband, filled with guilt, saw his own mother off, then turned to face his cold-faced mother-in-law. "Quite the authority you have, dear-in-law. Is this the kind of life our Yingzhen had to endure in your household?" Qixing felt utterly helpless and on the verge of tears. In the end, the mother-in-law still couldn't hire a postpartum nanny for Zhang Yangyang. First, it was too urgent, and there were no available postpartum nannies. Second, Zhang Yangyang's demands were too high. She insisted on a top-tier nanny, and her mother-in-law simply couldn't bear to spend the money. She threw herself on the ground and made a scene repeatedly, and in the end, she somehow managed to get Zhang Yangyang to back down. After a month of calm, my mother-in-law began to arrange the full-month banquet with a stern face again. Since the 2 children were born on the same day, it was impractical to hold the full-month banquet on 2 separate days. My mother-in-law's face darkened with resentment, unwilling to accept only one set of gifts. At the full-month banquet, when I saw the 2 of them again, Zhang Yangyang no longer had the radiant glow from the previous life but instead looked haggard. I heard that during her postpartum confinement, she and her mother-in-law were at each other's throats, and it seemed she didn't gain much advantage. Instead, she started paying more attention to her daughter, and even her usually biased mother-in-law praised Kazadi for being well-behaved, except when calling her by name. Kazadi, however, seemed listless, born with deficiencies and then subjected to all sorts of reckless torment. It's no wonder she couldn't live well. When drawing lots, she picked and chose among a circle of items, but in the end, she reluctantly picked up the harmonica her little uncle had been playing with. Even the gaps were mixed with dust and grime, and there was still fresh saliva on the harmonica from just having been played. She still couldn't let go of her music dream. I deliberately pulled the harmonica out of her two small hands. Getting your mother a younger brother is the real business. What good can a harmonica do? The adults present all agreed. Chijadi angrily turned her head away, refusing to look at me. The second son, Chigang, even threw away the harmonica and shoved a photo of the family of 4, with both a son and a daughter, into her hands. She began to wail loudly. Chijadi's good days only lasted these 2 years. 2 years later, when Chiyazu was born, that was when she really had something to cry about. She was no longer an only child but had become her brother's slave. The following years, thanks to her efforts, were relatively calm. Chijadi, with memories from her past life, was sensible and mature beyond her years. Plus, she had indeed brought a younger brother into the family, so Zhang Yangyang, as if granting a favor, actually treated her much better. It's just that all those good things are built upon her various sacrifices. She has to wash her brother's clothes, make breakfast for the whole family, massage her mother's shoulders, buy cigarettes for her father, and help her grandmother with grocery shopping. As for princess dresses, small cakes, and violins, none of these exist in her world. For her mother, the only thing worth showing off is her first-place academic performance. In her previous life, she effortlessly obtained all kinds of material comforts, but in this life, she has to rack her brains and exhaust herself to achieve the same. Yet, it still falls far short of what she had in her previous life. Every time I return to my hometown for the new year, I buy new clothes and scarves for the whole family as usual. This time, however, I deliberately bought Chijadi's piece in black. As expected, in the choice between her precious son and her cheap daughter, Chijadi was completely defeated. Zhang Yangyang unhesitatingly snatched her clothes away. This time, the one left to suffer in the winter cold was Chijadi. How could she, who had been accustomed to a life of comfort in her previous life, bear this, in this lifetime, let alone being the top? She couldn't even get a ticket to the world of music. When she was 7 years old, she cried and threw herself into my arms, loudly insisting that I was her real mother. My biological daughter, Yaoyao, was pushed by her into the snow. Children's words are innocent, but the expressions of everyone present were far from pleasant. Before I could react, Zhang Yangyang pulled her back and landed a solid slap on her face. How dare you talk such nonsense? Haven't I treated you well? If you say something like that again, I'll hit you every time. Chijadi, like a kite that had lost its string and weight, fell heavily into the snow. But when I turned around, what I saw was Zhang Yangyang carefully helping my daughter up, and the 5-year-old brother winked, stuck out his tongue, and made faces at her. Kazadi's face turned pale and then red, whether from the cold or from being hit. I pulled her up and patted the snow off her old clothes. This time, it was her turn to wear someone else's old clothes. She was no longer the cherished only child of our family, but Yazu's older sister. The child has a fever and is talking nonsense. Sure enough, as soon as the mother-in-law touched the forehead, it was alarmingly hot. Yet just this afternoon, she had made Chijadi wash all the vegetables for tonight's New Year's Eve dinner with cold water. You, child, you didn't say you were feeling unwell, and instead you were talking such strange things. My mother-in-law is about to use her folk remedy again, trying to warm her up to reduce the fever. In recent years, Chijadi's health has been poor, with constant minor illnesses. Zhang Yangyang and her mother-in-law's limited patience and goodwill toward her have gradually worn thin with each bout of sickness. Each time she falls ill, it's rare for her to be taken to the hospital. Zhang Yangyang not only did not stop her mother-in-law but also brought a feather duster and gave Chijadi a good beating. A perfectly good New Year's Eve dinner has been ruined by you, you jinx. Don't hit the child during the New Year. Only Chishing spoke up for her. In our previous life as her parents, when did our daughter ever suffer any beatings? We cherished her so much, holding her in the palms of our hands, that we couldn't spoil her enough. After I was pushed off the high-rise, Chishan was heartbroken and became despondent. She seized this opportunity to persuade him to divide the family assets and give them to her biological parents. Later, when he lay on his sickbed, suffering from illness with not much time left, he couldn't even scrape together a single penny for medical treatment, because all the money was taken away by that ungrateful person. Chijadi stood frozen in place, neither running nor hiding. Her soul was that of an adult, but the dignity and pride that belonged to an adult had been worn away by the daily beatings and scoldings. She lowered her head and looked at her hands. A pair of slender hands that once played world-class music have now become clumsy and covered with chilblains. Can a bird that has fallen into the whirlpool of life ever return to its noble branch? The high fever persisted, making the night seem so long. In the endless darkness, only scattered snowflakes drifted down from the abyss. Chi Zhaodi began to speak deliriously again. The life in her previous existence was so different from her current reality that she began to wonder if it had all been just a magnificent dream. Her mother-in-law kept covering her with thick quilts, and after exhausting herself with all the effort, she simply went back to her room to sleep, believing that everything would eventually be fine. This was how things had been for so many years. Chi Zhaodi broke out in a cold sweat. And when Yao Yao brought her water, she seemed to suddenly become a bit more lucid. She looked at Yao Yao as if recalling something terrifying, her eyes wide and fixed, then began to sob uncontrollably. She thought of her previous life, the child who had died before reaching the age of 10, the one Zhang Yangyang had failed to raise. In this life, that child had become her. She was 7 years old this year. Chi Zhaodi had a persistent high fever, and Qi Xing couldn't bear it. So he called an ambulance for her on New Year's Eve. Red and blue lights flickered on the snowy ground. Many villagers, finding it unlucky, hid indoors and didn't come out to watch the fireworks. The two got into the ambulance amid the family's curses and complaints. Chi Zhaodi, as if grasping at a lifeline, knelt on the ground, clutching Qi Xing's pant leg, crying and begging. She called him dad one moment and uncle the next, pleading with him to adopt her. Zhang Yangyang, standing beside me, kept calling Qi Xing. Taking my daughter to see a doctor is a small matter, but spending money is a big deal. It was already unlucky enough to call an ambulance to the hospital on New Year's Eve. What if the person couldn't be saved and died during the new year? Wouldn't that be even more unlucky? The most important thing is not to bring bad luck to Yaozu, her precious son. What's there to save? The doctor said back then that she wouldn't live past adulthood anyway. All these years, I've just acted as if I never had this daughter. Her being alive will only block Yaozu's good fortune. Forget it, big brother. Hand the phone to her. I'll talk to her. Zhang Yangyang mercilessly delivered the grim news that Chi Zhaodi would not live to adulthood, ignoring the crying and wailing from the other side, and ordered her to get off the ambulance and go home immediately. Mom, even from a distance. I could hear the heart-wrenching and desperate screams. Zhang Yangyang frowned and held the phone away from his ear, cursing under his breath. Why did you treat me like that? Qi Yao is not, she's not, I am your daughter, I am. Chi Zhaodi told the truth, and Zhang Yangyang muttered under her breath, what nonsense, she must be delirious from the fever. But the hand holding the phone trembled slightly. Then, without even watching the fireworks, she panicked and carried Qi Yaozu back into the house. What good is knowing the truth? What good is regret? You reap what you sow. Chi Zhaodi stayed in the hospital for several days, and aside from her uncle Qi Xing, no one came to visit her. This new year, she spent it all alone in the hospital. On the day of discharge, the gray sky began to snow again. Her condition had improved significantly, both physically and mentally, as if the prophecy of not living past 18 had crushed the last straw. Or as if Zhang Yangyang and her mother-in-law were filled with regret. Chi Zhaodi began to act recklessly at home. She began to deliberately oppose her mother-in-law and her own mother. The two were in the wrong from the start, so they tolerated it repeatedly at first, but eventually, they could bear it no longer. Zhang Yangyang picked up the feather duster again and gave her a good thrashing. I am your birth mother, I gave birth to you, and now you're trying to boss me around, is that it? Even if I did something wrong, it's still. Halfway through, she suddenly couldn't go on. Back then, it was she who watched her mother-in-law dress Chi Zhaodi in old clothes and prepare her formula, and it was she who turned a blind eye to the incessantly crying infant. For so many years, she has been casually ordered around and enslaved. She always thought that child was my daughter, so she remained indifferent. Zhang Yangyang sat on the ground, crying bitterly with her head in her hands. Chi Zhaodi stood still calmly. Then, taking Zhang Yangyang's phone, they called the police. Someone is abusing a child. Except for the Chiu family's prized son Yaozu, the entire family was rounded up and appeared neatly at the police station. A soft-hearted policewoman held Chiu Zhaodi's frail body, tears falling drop by drop into her dry, straw-like hair. My husband and I were summoned as witnesses, thanks to my mother-in-law's silver tongue and Qi Xing's overly kind nature. The group didn't face much punishment. Chi Zhaodi had not anticipated this outcome at all. She completely broke down, pointing at Qi Xing and yelling as if he had wronged her terribly. How can you say that? You've watched me suffer all these years. How could you? You are me. You are. The last word was never spoken. After leaving the police station, the mother-in-law looked extremely smug and snorted disdainfully. Who is he? Who is he? He's your uncle, right? Ha, he's my son. Of course he's on my side. Chi Zhaodi turned her head away, stiffening her neck as she wiped her tears, but the family's guilt toward her had completely vanished. She actually called the police to arrest them. If they really ended up with a criminal record from this, how could that be acceptable? Although Chi Zhaodi was destined not to live much longer, the family's precious heir, Yaozu, almost couldn't take the civil service exam because of this. After seeing us, the couple, off peacefully. Zhang Yangyang and her mother-in-law closed the door and gave Qizhaodi another severe beating. This time, she was truly subdued, with death looming closer and closer. I remembered the first time that child performed on stage. She seemed to be about the same age as now. It was late spring, with dazzling lights shining on the stage. She stood at the very center, bathed in countless beams of light, yet in her little dress, she did not feel cold. She didn't play the violin very well in the first performance and only won a bronze medal, but she was very happy and promised me that she would practice more diligently in the future. I don't know when practicing the violin became, in her words, the pressure I forced upon her. I watched the gate grow smaller and smaller in the rearview mirror. In my previous life, when my biological daughter was this age, what kind of life was she living? That tightly shut door gradually shrank into a small dot. It was still far from spring. I didn't expect the day I would return to my hometown again to be so near. A great fire burned the old house to the ground, and the once loudmouth members of the Qi family were nowhere to be found. One by one, Qixing's legs gave way, and he stumbled into a pile of ashes, crying out for his parents. According to the neighbors, it was Qizhaodi who bought the gasoline. At the time, she kept muttering that she would never be cold again, something about a carnival, spring, and the like, and the Qi family members shouting to escape for their lives as the fire first began to blaze. Yet, for some reason, not a single one of them managed to escape. The one who survived was actually the 5-year-old Qi Yaozu. It was a stroke of luck amidst the misfortune. However, he was injured in his vital parts, and the Qi family's lineage would be cut off from then on, a misfortune within a stroke of luck. As the sole eyewitness, Qi Yaozu was placed under special protection. When he woke up, he became somewhat delusional. Sister wants to kill me, she wants to kill me. She was still singing in the fire, gesturing with both hands. Where's Mom? Where is she? Is Mom dead? Wah, am I going to die? In his disjointed account, the police learned the truth of the matter. The fire was indeed set by Qizhaodi. However, at first, it seemed like everyone could have escaped. But she directly took Qi Yaozu hostage and ordered everyone not to run. Only Zhang Yangyang stopped in his tracks. Only a mother can't bear to part with her child. The mother-in-law hesitated for only a moment, and Qigong didn't even look back. What are the Qi family's lineage and lifeline compared to one's own life? They are not worth mentioning. Qizhaodi held a knife against Qi Yaozu's neck, emotionally distraught, sobbing about past lives and the present. Before she could finish, Qigong and the mother-in-law had already turned back. The main door had long been locked. They were about to jump from the second floor, and as luck would have it, Qizhaodi was standing at the top of the stairs. Thick smoke billowed everywhere, and before Qizhaodi could say a few words, she was choked and could no longer hold the knife. Qigong was the first to go upstairs, but she stabbed him in the lower back. The mother-in-law was terrified, trembling and not daring to step forward, while Qi Yaozu took advantage of the moment and ran to the second floor. Mom, come with me. I heard Uncle asking you for money. If I had known it was me from the start, would you still have treated me this way? Zhang Yangyang remained silent, his figure hidden in the thick smoke. Qizhaodi couldn't stand steadily, and her mother-in-law took the opportunity to step forward and push her down. Jinx, what great sin did I commit to meet a jinx like you? But Zhang Yangyang grabbed her by the hair, roaring with a choked voice, "It's all your fault. You're the one who did this to my daughter. You're the one who ruined our family." In the pitch-black thick fog and blazing flames, Qi Yaozu looked back and saw only two women wrestling with each other, hearing intermittent, hoarse melodies. His heart was pounding, and without bothering to wonder why no one had followed behind him, he trembled as he jumped down from the second floor. In the end, he could still open his eyes and see his uncle. He threw himself into Qixing's arms, crying with tears and a runny nose. "Uncle, the police officer said that since I survived a great disaster, I must have good fortune ahead, but now I've lost my home. Can I come live with you? Grandma said that Sister Yao Yao is just a girl and will get married sooner or later." My expression gradually turned cold. Qixing, with tears in his eyes, gently pulled away Yaozu's chubby little hand and put the oxygen mask back on him. Qizhaodi, fearing that the fire alone wouldn't be enough to kill everyone, also poisoned the entire family with pesticide. As they left the hospital, the snow began to fall again. Spring was still far away. Spring will come.